Listeners everywhere, welcome to the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan, the weekly fix for your screen addiction and a trusted source for discussion of all things film and television. Please keep in mind that for the purposes of this podcast, Joel and Ryan are not acting as journalists, but rather fellow moving picture enthusiasts. All of their opinions should be taken as such. Also, please be warned that while Joel and Ryan may seem like petulant children, they are, in fact, adults who may occasionally use adult language. While they promise to bleep out all the worst words, it's a good bet you will still understand what they were saying. And now, with no further ado, here's Joel and Ryan.
Hello, my little babies. We're back. Oh, hello. I know you missed us, but we're here. We're here, and you're here. We're all here on the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. I am Joel.
And I'm Ryan.
I know we kind of surprised you last week by not having a show. We were planning on a show. We were. But life happens. I got myself a cold. And Ryan.
Best laid plans.
Yep. Ryan was laid up a little bit too. But I'm assuming, Ryan, that that allowed you to probably get some good movie watching time in. Anything?
Yeah, a little bit. I got some, but mostly I've been trying to get the ants out of here.
Oh, it is ant season. Yeah.
I left a toenail for the ants to get all excited about, and they came and and normally you get rid of the thing that they want and they pretty much go away, but
yep.
Wherever they came from, it's probably really cold there still, and so they just kind of keep hanging around. And
well, yeah, we had that little warm stretch here in Minnesota that helped melt a lot of the snow and helped wake up a lot of the insects and stuff. And then it got really cold again, and then they were like, "Hey, let's go inside." And so
I was asked that in a business meeting once. Somebody. Manager of customer service manager had this little box of cards that had all these little get to know you weird questions in them.
Yeah.
And pulled out one of those and was like, "What is your favorite day of the year?" And I was like, oh. In a way, that's like an easy one, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, oh, well, what's the day when it freezes and all the bugs die?
Yep. Yeah, that's a big time day.
It is. It's just the best. It's just the best day. And I just, so I don't like, but ants. Okay, a box elder bug. I'm very scared of bugs, but these sorts of everyday things, like I can relax a little bit about.
Yeah, these are the nuisance bugs. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're not that big. They're like flies, mosquitoes. I'm not scared of those. I don't like any of them, but I'm not scared of them. You get into centipedes and crickets and stuff, and I'm actually scared of those. I'm genuinely, my heart races, and I'm not so big a wuss that I can't deal with them, but I freak out. My whole body wakes up.
Mm-hmm.
So the ants are okay. And normally I would welcome our new ant overlords, but... It's too soon, It's just.
Are you
really cold in here still? And
when you get bit by a mosquito, do you itch a lot? Do you swell up? Do you do any? Are you or do they not bother
mildly?
You? Yeah,
mildly. Why do some people not react to mosquito bites?
Yeah, Jennifer, my wife doesn't react at all. She's like, it's not, doesn't itch at all. I go nuts. No. My son goes nuts. We're like, it's just so, it's brutal. Oh, I hate it. So get that to look forward to.
I wouldn't say I go nuts, but little mounds. And, they love my head. I can't go out in the summer anymore, without a hat on, which I'm not a hat guy. But
maybe that's a whole show topic on Movie Show with Joel and Ryan is we'll talk about the fact that we have to wear hats and neither of us are hat people.
Right.
Maybe we'll do a whole show on top hats, best hats, top 5 hats in movies, and could we pull them off?
Or maybe we could put that category in a show where we do a show about categories that we didn't do.
Possibly. Maybe I'll add that to the master list of things that we sometimes think we're
pretty cool hats out there in moviedom, truly.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
I got to wear a hat because of the mosquitoes, because on my head, it's like anything. If you cut yourself on your head, it doesn't hurt you that bad, but it just bleeds and bleeds and bleeds. Because there's, so yes, on my head, that is the exception. I hate getting bit by a mosquito on my head.
Right.
And they come from miles around when they see my little light bulb head come out at night.
Yeah. I feel the same way. They're just like, oh, Joel's out. Yay. Meals.
Look at his pale German skin.
Oh, look at that. We can. Oh, I have a, I have a lot of leg hair. And so it does provide an obstacle. Like they're like, oh, I'm going to get to that skin. Oh, boy.
But then you notice that.
Yeah, and then that does give me a little bit of time. Sometimes it gives me a little barrier. All right, well, this is the hard-hitting news that you're going to get on Movie Show with Joel and Ryan.
Woo, we
know you missed that last week. All right. So this week we are going to do ourselves a countdown. We are going to be looking at the movies of director Peter Hyams. Who's Peter Hyams, you say? Peter Hyams.
He's a workaday director. We're going to do some series it's easy to do Michael Mann because there's so much to say about thematic richness and his way of telling the kind of, like I always say, you can tell an artist because they tell the same story over and over and over again. And he's one of those guys. Peter, though, kind of. But Peter's just a guy who made movies, and I made a little list of them that we're going to explore some of these guys, because a lot of these movies, some of them will show up on this list or that. I make a confession. If you liked our Halloween double feature episode with Rob and Michael, we're going to do another one of those here in a few weeks. We got to watch the movies, so those take a little time to get together. But my two movies in that are going to be Peter Hyams movies, so I'm kind of doubling up. I'm going to let them react to a couple on this list. So there's but he's a guy whose films I feel like have been with me my whole life. There's other guys too, John Badham, Joseph Rubin. I got all the films of these people, and the thing I think that set them apart, because they're not bad filmmakers, they're really good ones in a way. Peter's a really, really talented guy. But there's not a lot of high art on this list anywhere, even though there's some really fine entertainment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, what you do all the big heavy hitters. I mean, we haven't done them all. There's a ton out there, but the idea was to go through filmmakers of our lifetimes that were kind of slick commercial filmmakers, but still still put quite a thing together. And he's a great one to start with, because he's a name most people have no idea about, and yet when you start listing the movies,
I do love, to me, this quote that he has. It kind of sums up like probably what kind of cool chill guy he is. As he says, like, O.J. Simpson was in Capricorn 1. Robert Blake was in Busting. I've said many times, some people have AFI Lifetime Achievements Award. Some people have multiple Oscars. My bit of trivia is that I've made 2 films with 2 leading men who were subsequently tried for first-degree murder of their wives.
And one of them was convicted even.
Yeah. And I'm like, you kind of just gotta, he's like, yeah, well, those are the movies I made.
That's what I did.
Yep.
It's funny. We'll get to OJ right away, but OJ was foisted upon him. He didn't want OJ.
Right.
He had other ideas for that part, but we're not even going to talk about Busting. But before we talk about any of them,
we're not going to talk about
mention it. We've mentioned it now. We'll mention it again. But before we do any of that, we got to play the countdown, don't we?
Oh, yeah. Let's hit a countdown. Here we go. Countdown of Peter Hyams.
10 seconds. 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
So
there you go.
Peter's career really does start with Busting, written and directed by Peter Hyams is a writer. Most directors who show in this category, filmmakers aren't writers. Typically, commercial directors tend to be really good storytellers, but they typically leave the writing to others. Busting was written and directed by him. It was essentially his breakup picture. It has, as you say, Robert Blake in it. He's the sidekick to Elliot Gould. They both play cops who go off the reservation and go catch the guy that they've been told, hey, you cops, you're off the case, or whatever. And then they're like, you're off your case, chief. And they just go, I've never seen it, so I'm just kind of making this up. But that's the basic premise of the movie. We've seen this story before.
If Elliot Gould's in it, then they're like, you're off your case. You're off your case, chief. And then Elliot Gould will do a one of those looks. Yeah, he's really good at.
Yeah, Elliot's great, and we're going to get to him in a second too, because he's an actor I didn't really like, because I think he's the person that is Elliot Gould is buried in all this blah 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 all the time, and I always struggling to find him. But what's fun is that when he peeks through, it's really exciting. So, and I've seen a couple of his better films lately. We talked about one of them back in the 70s episode, The Long Good Night. That's a really, really good movie with a really, really strong performance. And but I think knowing Peter, I don't want to judge Busting, but because I haven't seen it, it's out on Blu-ray now, so I should pick it up before it goes out of print and add it to my Hyams collection. But it started things off for him, and it started a lot of relationships with a couple of different actors, and knowing his writing, it's very righty, like it's very movie-ish. It's very movie worshipful in its dialogue and in its delivery. It's telling a rather cliched idea of a story, and instead of being ashamed of it or trying to hide that it's derivative, it's embracing all of that stuff in every scene, would be my guess. And the next two films he did, I can't remember the name of the second one. The third one is Peeping.
Yep, I got it's Our Time.
Our Time and Peeping.
And it's that one was Pamela Sue Martin, Parker Stevenson, Betsy Slade was Our Time.
That genuinely sounds good. A period romance in the 50s where, a forbidden romance, such as where it's not Romeo and Juliet. But
the story is set at a Massachusetts school for girls in the 50s.
Pamela Sue Martin and Parker Stevenson in 1975 or whatever, and that's top stuff. That would have been really good in a story like that. And then Parker was in A Separate Piece, I want to say, which he's really good. And we think of him as like one of the Hardy Boys, and he was originally one of the two stars of Baywatch. Sorry that Baywatch keeps coming up, but it keeps being relevant, folks. And I won't shy away from it. So he's
Baywatch is going to Baywatch,
He was the bad guy in Stroker Ace. I don't know. What do you want from me? I'm Ryan.
Yeah, Parker had a good
stuff.
Parker
Stevenson's cool. Pamela Sue Martin's awesome. She was in other cool things too. And Peeper, I don't know much about that, but it's got a funny premise, I believe.
Yeah, well, Peeper starred Michael Caine, which means that you get to do your Michael Caine.
I don't remember anything about Peeper.
I'm sure here's the thing.
Fine film.
Peeper was but was such a box office failure that it jeopardized Hyams' career and almost cost him his funding for his next film. So he
which is where he really hit the scene, I think. Which is where our list starts.
Indeed it do. And then so we're gonna take a nice trip back to 1977. Remember 1977, Ryan?
Yes, very well.
Very well
indeed.
We have moved on from the space race to the moon, and now we are going to go space race to Mars. This one appeared in your conspiracy theory episode too.
As an also correctly. Ran, but we never even mentioned it in that. We just so much conspiracies going on that I kind of forgot to say it, or if I did, I only mentioned it by name. It's Capricorn 1.
Yeah.
Sorry if I ruined, like, if you were going to say that in a special way.
No. I was too busy thinking about how I could help you there in case your hiccups got worse. So I apologize for kind of leaving you hanging there.
Can't podcast and drink soda at the same time without getting hiccups.
No, I apologize. I was like, how do I help him? And then I realized no one's talking.
and no one can help me when it comes to the hiccups. It just you could try and scare me, but unless you're like a oversized bug or whatever, it ain't gonna work. It's okay. We can all live with me having a few hiccups during the show. Right?
All right. Well,
so,
no.
77.
So
I can't tell you. This really is. This is the quintessential. I'm sorry that we're getting it out of the way so soon, because it'd be fun if we could build up to this.
Right.
But this is the quintessential Peter Hyams script. It's an ensemble of actors who all speak with his same voice, truly. Yep. And it's packed to the rafters with funny lines and weird, drawn out speeches that when they finally get to someplace obvious, this is a staple of his writing. Yeah. I'm making it sound bad, but it is very, very entertaining.
It was just on the other night, and I watched it, and it was really fun.
It was the most successful independent film of 1977. It's like came in like 11 or 12 on the year, I want to say. But it was independently financed by Sir Lou Grade, or later Lord Grade. Lou Grade was this British guy who had a lot of money and sort of financed these films. And I brought him up on the show before. My favorite line of his ever, because all these old producers all have a famous line that sort of define who they are, but Lou Grade's is, and it's in reference to his big box office bomb in 1980, Clive Cussler's Raise the Titanic. And when he asked about it, he said, "It would have been cheaper to lower the Atlantic."
It's a good line.
If you're a big movie fan, you might even remember the logo, ITC. This was distributed by Avco Embassy. I get really excited about these sorts of minutiae, so sorry about that. But it's a very fun conspiracy film, but it's a really, really fun one. It shares three actors that were all in All the President's Men, of completely tonally different conspiracy film.
Very much so,
event.
Yeah.
But it has
it plays
Baldwin
off of that,
and Hal
Holbrook.
Yeah, Hal Holbrook, and there's one other person to it. I'm not thinking of who they are.
Let me see if I can pull it here. Let's see, Hal Holbrook, not David Huston, not David Doyle. God, this is a great cast.
It's the story about mission to Mars, basically. That Capricorn 1. That's the name of the module. That's the space module that's going to Mars.
Yeah, here's the little one sentence here. When the first manned flight to Mars is deemed unsafe and scrubbed on the launch pad, anxious authorities must scramble to save face and retain their funding, and so an unthinkable plot to fake the mission is hatched. Which is great, because also, in 69, when we went to the moon, there were tons of people, that like in the early 70s, that's when the traction hit of like, we didn't actually go to the moon. We didn't actually go to the moon.
In the 60s, there was the idea was hatched that it might be fake, but within the counterculture of the 60s, but it really didn't become a conspiracy that was very, very famous until right around this time, at post-Watergate, where just everything's fake, everything's a lie, everything's a conspiracy. So and he was trying to tell this story for years. What would it take? Why would it happen? You know what I mean? And what would be the consequences of a plot like that going wrong for the people involved? That's the story. And it runs out all those ideas in really great ways. So it's an extremely successful film. But yeah, it's, they're up in the capsule and they're getting ready, and everyone, the head of NASA and the vice president or whatever, all sitting in the stands watching, and then this dude just walks up, knocks on the window, he's wearing a suit or whatever, and he's like, gentlemen, I need you to leave the module immediately. And they rush them off in a private jet to some place in the middle of Nevada or New Mexico or something. And put them in this little conference room where they're standing around waiting. The three astronauts are played by really well by James Brolin, Sam Waterston, and O.J. Simpson. And I don't know what to say. And then they basically are told, it's in a long, long monologue that takes forever to get to the point by Hal Holbrook. They're told the story of the compromises that happening in business and stuff. And the powers that be when it comes to projects of this sort of money, wanting to see this thing exist, even though it's not safe to send them up there. There's a very bad chance that the life support system on their spacecraft is going to fail. It was made by a company called Con Amalgamate, by the way, which we'll talk about those guys a little later. They keep coming up in these films, which is really fun. So they're told they have to fake it. And he's like, well, what if we say no? And Hal's got this great line, don't say no.
Don't say no.
It basically threatening their families. They know where your families are. Hey, it's not me. I'm just a messenger. But, Hal's so great in that. I mean, he elevates this material because
he really does. We
associate him with so much better, I hate to say, I'm sorry, Peter, but really better writing. And so when he comes in and he says all this corny stuff and he takes forever to get to the point, he's captivating and he's fun to listen to. And I mean, that's what makes the thing work. Elsewhere, Elliot Gould plays a down on his luck investigative reporter who finds conspiracies everywhere he looks. And him and Karen Black, she's a fellow reporter who he has affairs with off and on. And their little lingo, their little old school, I don't know what you want to call it, like sort of like Bogart Hepburn's, or maybe Tracy Hepburn's better, closer. Either way, they have this way they talk, which is super fun. These guys all have families. It's a big ensemble cast. It has, just a boiler to say too much about it, but it has my favorite performance by Telly Savalas ever in a film. Ever. He is gloriously awesome in it.
This movie has got just a terrific cast of like people who were, who were just doing like great work through the 70s and into the 80s, from Hal Holbrook to Telly Savalas, David Doyle, David Huddleston.
David Huddleston is as good as I've ever seen him in anything in this film too.
James Brolin is really great at just that at the gravity, like putting gravity into the situation. And taking, he's never winking at anything. This isn't a comedy, but it's really it's just fun, and he is doing some heavy lifting to just make this scene.
He has to, because you get nothing from Holbrook. He talks a lot, but he's and OJ hardly has any lines to say, and Sam Waterston's a total smartass. He never says he's the opposite. He never says anything serious in the whole movie.
Sam Waterston gets to just sit there and go eyebrows. He gets to just have eyebrows going, what are we doing? and that's just,
there's a great moment where they're all sitting around waiting for something, and something was supposed to happen. And I don't want to, like I say, I don't want to get too into the details of it, but they're waiting, and Josh Brolin just sort of out of nowhere says something's gone wrong. And then they're like, what could it be? What he goes, what would have gone wrong? And he's like, we're dead. And Waterston's reaction is, geez, and I was such a terrific guy. David Doyle, who's most famous for playing Bosley in the Charlie's Angels, he plays Elliot Gould's editor. That's, if you know the reporter-editor relationship in these things, you've seen this before. They have these huge arguments that are extremely entertaining. Gould's like, it wasn't with you. You never support anything I say. I saw a movie once where the editor says, all right, kid, you can chase this down. You got 48 hours, but you better, get the story or your butt's on the line or whatever. And Doyle's like, okay, you want to do it like that? Well, then it's 24 hours. I saw that movie too, and it was 24. And
yeah,
it's fun. It's really, really fun stuff. Even though there is life and death involved, and so there's a lot at stake in it, but I just really, really like it. Robert Waldron's great in it too. He's always good. He plays the only nerd at NASA who's like, hey, wait a minute. This signals seem to be coming from New Mexico. I mean, they make it more, they dress it up in more science-iness than that, but that's essentially what he discovers. And the faked mission is really, really pulled off visually and believably in a way that you could believe that we would all be snookered by it, which is a big task that the film has to make. Mm-hmm. But what it really is ultimately is his chase movie that is buoyant, full of humor, and it has a couple of sequences. It has what was at the time and may still be to this day. You guys can be the judge. It has the greatest, kind of most dangerous aerial dogfight of all time at the end. That's the big ending, and it is incredible. Matter of fact, the guy who flies the biplane in those stunt sequences died in his next movie because he was an absolute madman. And that sequence, because this was an independent film and because it was owned by some people, the distribution rights, that sequence was sold to like The Fall Guy and this thing and that. So this bits of this little chase like keeps showing up in other people's work. There's another great sequence where this wasn't a very common thing, believe it or not, but this is kind of where it started, where the cliche of it started. But there's a sequence where they cut the brakes on Elliot Gould's Mustang, and he goes on one of those drives, where he's completely out of control. And that sequence too showed up in like all the late 70s and early 80s TV shows with just a different actor inserted into the inserts with the cover.
Yep.
So
the shot down the leg of him stomping on the brakes with nothing happening.
That incredible shot of the Mustang flying off the edge of the bridge and almost by accident hitting the cement barrier. Like it comes right up to it before it hits the water. That was not supposed to go that far. But again, that stunt guy was like, here we go.
Yep.
Anyway, to my knowledge, nobody was harmed during the making of Capricorn 1, but it's exciting. It's edge of your seat stuff, and yet it's fun and surfacey enough that you really can just kick back and enjoy it. Very famously, Peter, I think, understood this is where my career was made with this film. A different producer came up to him after a screening and even while the movie was playing, and he's like, this is going to make you really, really popular. I hope you're ready for that. That's what he said to him, which he said was sort of loaded. It was kind of a double meaning. He was ready for it. He had all these movies he wanted to make, but it's, when you go from being some guy that the studios and the big time producers ignore to somebody who they bring you under their thumb, particularly in this era, it is a different thing and a different way that you have to operate. So Capricorn 1's a blast, man. If you haven't seen it and you like 70s cinema, or you like that sort of old school movie dialogue, I mean, it's just packed to the rafters with it. It's really, really fun.
Yeah. Brenda Vaccaro, Karen Black.
Brenda Vaccaro again. I mentioned Karen Black. Brenda Vaccaro's outstanding in this film. She's always really good, but she's really, really good in this because she has to, through all that zany talk, she plays Josh Brolin's wife, or James Brolin's wife. She's got to find a person there. It's really important. They don't all have to do that. So Waterston doesn't really have to do it, but some of these guys have to pull that off, or there's not a lot of humanity here. And Gould does it in some great moments, and she does it, I think, most of all. And as you say, Brolin really, he's the perfect, because he's at the top of his sort of good-looking guy, leading man sort of thing in this. He's also film features the two main characters are husband and former husband of Barbara Streisand.
Well, there you go.
So that little shot of them running in slow motion at the end would be something of a nightmare for her, I would imagine. But it's a joyous moment of victory for the rest.
Yeah. So next up, a couple years later, he gets he comes out with his follow-up film, and he is working with Harrison Ford on a movie called Hanover Street.
Harrison Ford, last second replacement. Actually, both the leads in this film were brought in when the sets were pretty much already built. This was supposed to be Sarah Miles and Chris Christopherson, but Christopherson backed out, and when he backed out, Miles also quit. So this was literally who can we get? Okay, because in is it 78 that this came out? Late
this is 70. Yeah, it was 79 is what it's tagged at.
So early in 79. So the guy who, and they were lucky to get him, Harrison Ford, obviously, right? But this is a Harrison Ford movie that not many of you have seen, I bet. It's a big budget film. It's a World War II romance. He wanted to tell the movie most resembles or most rips off, depending on your point of view, is Waterloo Bridge. It also has the name of a place as a title. He's making an homage to this kind of film. The romantic sweepingness of war that like two people get caught up in and fall in love with each other, and of course that leads to all kinds of complications, and both heroic and tragic. What is there a thingy?
Yeah, I mean, it's just real quick. Margaret is a nurse in England during World War II and married to a secret agent. Things get complicated when she falls for David, an American pilot.
And he's a B-12 pilot. And this, and not Memphis Belle, is typically the film that most B-12 pilots or B-12 aficionados love. It's their favorite B-12 movie, which is weird. If you know Memphis Belle, then you know the kind of plane I'm talking about. It's a bomber plane. It's got a very specific set of like crew members, of which are cast with some really cool actors. Richard Masur is the nose gunner. Michael Sachs is the co-pilot. Michael Sachs is a great actor. This is sort of getting towards the end of he's about to hang up the acting cleats in the next couple films, but he's kind of perfect to play off of Harrison. And they're going on all these successful missions and stuff. And they meet in the street, it's hard to explain their meeting. I can't even, it's absolutely corny. It's the corniest thing in the film. The film is unabashedly romantic. So you got that. Harrison took the role at the last second without really doing, even in this era, doing his usual hemming and hawing over it, because no one had asked him to play a romantic lead. He's been acting for 12 years or whatever, and no one had ever said, oh, you come here and this lovely woman will fall in love with you and the whole audience will fall in love with you. It features his first on-screen kiss with Leslie Ann Down, which, by this point, you'd think he'd have done that once or twice. He did not.
Yeah, weird.
So that's why he agreed to do it. The nurse in question isn't just some nurse. She's the wife of a very high class member of the aristocracy in England, who, as Joel pointed out, is also a spy. Although the movie makes a point to show that he's not really a spy. He's like a spy professor, played by Christopher Plummer, and he's teaching these guys German. He's putting them through the ringer. He's pretending to interrogate them. He's doing all this stuff, but he makes a point to say, he never goes on the mission himself. He's not a hero. He has in a way that if anyone else had written this, this scene wouldn't exist. But because it's Peter Hyams, it's all all the feelings are all out here and everyone's expressing them all the time.
Mm-hmm.
He has this scene where he admits his sort of, because he's an important guy in the war effort, England, you know, and yet he admits this sort of insecurity that he has about not being the guy who does the thing, and that she probably deserves more than that. And he's older than her. And, you know, it's this kind of sad scene. Really young Patsy Kensit plays their daughter.
Yeah.
But this movie, it's not Capricorn 1. I mean, it has a bit of a cult following because there's a lot of real pleasures to it. You know, like I say, the B-12 sequences are fantastic. There's some psychologically interesting things that are going on with both Plummer and Ford's character as two people who are executing this war. Leslie Ann Down, who's wonderful, is really left to be like, oh, she's just kind of, what do I do? I love this guy, but I also love this guy. And that's a tough spot for a heroine in a film. It's a very common one in this kind of movie back in the 40s and 50s to be placed in. In the late 70s, it's really tough to go, oh yeah, you're in love with more than one person. We feel really bad for you. You know, you kind of watch
yeah.
And that's too bad because she doesn't do anything wrong. And she does bring a lot of pathos to the character, but that's a tough one to buy. And the movie leaves her nothing to do. Of course, the film, through a convoluted series of events, sends these two guys to an undercover mission together, or thrusts them into one based on circumstances where each of their, you know, Harrison's sort of movie star heroism and Plummer's smarts and tactics have to combine to get this thing done, because neither of them could pull it off on their own. It's got some great stunts, has an incredible motorcycle jump over this ravine that was really shot. These were the days, right, where you shot this stuff. It's got some pretty bad rear projection effects at the end of that sequence, which sort of ruin it. But there's a lot to like about it. A lot of period stuff, beautiful, weepy, romantic, just drippingly romantic score by John Barry, which if you've seen our show about Somewhere in Time, or you've seen really any time we've talked about John, he was made for this kind of thing. And that really makes the thing wonderful. It's a big widescreen entertainment. It's just, even for 79, it's old fashioned to a fault.
Right.
And so people didn't really latch onto it. Ford didn't really end up appreciating it much. Plummer, I think he's in his element in parts of it, but in those scenes where he's like, my feelings are hurt by, I'm not a very brave person and I'm not good looking enough. It's like, is he really saying that stuff, Christopher Boyle? Yeah. He does it. He does the work of it, but you can tell they're all sort of, the only guy who's completely at home in this thing is Richard Masur, because he plays a super cowardly nose gunner who complains nervously every time. Like, there's just scenes of the plane flying. You don't even see him talking. You just hear him talking over the radio inside the thing. Just, should this be like this? Why are we doing this? Like, he doesn't want to die, obviously. And it's just super funny and weird. But, you know, there's like a dance scene at a officers club, and it's got all the requisite things that you want. There's a bombing of London where our two romantic star-crossed lovers have to huddle together in the dark. You know, it's got all that great stuff in it. It's very shadowly shot too, so it's very easy to look at, very moody, and I like it. I genuinely like it as much as anyone you will ever find. So take my enthusiasm for it with a grain of salt, because most people don't like Hanover Street.
So next up, I mean, as a writer, he did write The Hunter, Steve McQueen's movie.
Oh, yeah.
I think his final movie, I think. But then he his next movie as a director was he really wanted to do a Western.
That's right.
But instead he got to do Outland, which is a Western.
It
on
is
Jupiter.
it is literally high noon in space.
Yeah, it's high noon in space. A federal marshal stationed at a mining colony on the Jupiter moon of Io uncovers a drug smuggling conspiracy. He gets no help from the workers or authorities when he finds himself marked for murder.
This is one of the, well, I guess Capricorn 1 is going to be the other one. So I already kind of went off on that. But these were going to be my next double feature. Maybe I'll have to choose another one. I feel like if either Rob or Michael, and I suspect Michael hasn't really seen these, I really want to share them with them. So that's why I want to still do this, because those episodes aren't sort of about me pontificating or telling you everything about a movie, but they're about us sharing with each other, which I think is the magic of it. Mm-hmm. Maybe I'll still do it, but Outland is we're not giving the rankings of these. What was Capricorn 1?
Oh, I thought we were going to wait till the end, so that's why I just kind of let it go.
I think we should say what number they are, and then at the end we'll reveal the order. Otherwise,
no, that's just fine. That's just fine. Capricorn 1, despite its name, comes in at number 2.
Really good.
Hanover Street comes in at 10. Outland here is ranked as the number 3 Peter Hyams film.
And Outland is my personal little baby. Outland is my personal favorite. Mm-hmm. It's my binky. I love Outland. I can watch it. It's one of those movies where I can watch it just every night, basically, and fall asleep to it like a lullaby. It just got a great look. Again, great score by Jerry Goldsmith. Really, really solid effects for the time. Great, very serious, kind of silly setup, but with a very serious performance by Sean Connery when he was down in the dumps in terms of who would hire him for what. This was definitely one of those movies between Man Who Would Be King and Untouchables. There's this swath of stuff where he's still playing leading man roles, but they're just the best things you could get, and sometimes they're not great.
Yeah.
And this wasn't a huge hit, but it was a reasonable hit. So yay, good for that, because it's got a lot going for it. It's got just fantastic cinematography. It's got an incredible foot chase, an indoor foot chase in the middle of it. So there's this stuff where that recommend it, where you're like, oh yeah, I remember that. And the thing it has that Hanover Street was missing to some degree, but the thing that it has, the Capricorn 1 had, is these really, really vivid characters. The most vivid of which is played by Francis Sternhagen.
Right.
Who that role, first of all, that role was written for a man. I believe it was written for Sam Waterston, because it's essentially the same character as the one but he had gone off to bigger and more serious things. Yeah. And it was originally offered to, who was the actor? She's the one in that we were praising so much in When a Stranger Calls. She's the one that shows up later in the film. What's her name?
Oh God, yeah. I don't.
It was originally offered to her. She's really, really good. She turned it down though. And here's Frances, and man, this might be and this is an actor we love. Every time she comes up in Misery. She came up in The Mist. The Stephen King things. Every time she shows up in something, we adore her. And this part, I just don't know what to say. It's just fantastic. She just totally gets what Hyams wrote and plays it and brings it down to earth in this fantastic way. And maybe better than anyone ever does with his dialogue in any of his films. Connery gets, I'm not saying Connery like she's better than him, but he gets to play the straight guy. Brolin gets to play the straight guy. That's easier. Elliot Gould does this really good. Vaccaro does it really good, but they talk in a different way. She talks in this movie way that would really be annoying if she didn't do the work of making it awesome. And it's glorious because it's funny. All the stuff that she says is funny. This whole thing is like, well, are you sure? The sheriff and this doctor are at odds throughout the whole film, basically. Are you sure? And she's like, yes, I'm sure. I'm unpleasant. I'm not stupid. I can count. She's got, that's word for word a line that she says that I just can listen to her say over and over and over and over again. It's delightful. But federal marshal security for this mining operation on one of the violent moon of Jupiter, Io. Finds the conspiracy going on with this horrible company, Con Amalgamate. Told you we'd talk about those guys again. This film, not canonically, but this film takes place in the Alien universe. The set design is the same. The music is the same. The evil company that everybody just calls the company is the same. It really, the design of it, I can't stress this enough. The interiors, the company logos, the suits that they wear, the little jumpsuits, all of it is right out of Alien from a design standpoint. And then there's like 8 to 12 different crew members from Alien that worked on this film. So
that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and it just feels like that greasy, grimy, lived in. It's this old mining town, and when the black hat says, "Hey, Marshal, you're going to play along, or we're going to get rid of you," and the Marshal refuses, then the bad guys start showing up, and it's got that great scene. He comes into this cafeteria. You know, it's the saloon in High Noon. It's the big old metal cafeteria, which turns into a bar at night. They just changed the lighting. And I really believe that's not a movie thing. I think that's the cafeteria becomes a bar at night. They changed the lighting. Yeah,
because why not?
Right, exactly. He comes walking in there and everybody, it's that scene where they all go quiet. And the line is straight out of High Noon. So again, Peter's not being coy. This is High Noon. He says, except as Connery says, I could really use some help. Yep. And they're like, you're supposed to protect us. What are we supposed to do? The cowardly townspeople.
Yeah.
Real quick, I love Outland. I love it, top to bottom, kind of every moment of it. I love the big showdown at the end where the hero has to use his wits to avoid these assassins. I love Peter Boyle as the company stooge, who's the kind of the head of the. I love Peter Boyle in this. Love Francis Sternhagen in it, but more than that, in these tiny little roles. Maurice Robes, Angus, who we always talk about, and I always forget his name. Angus, he was Gold Leader or whatever in Star Wars. He's great.
Sorry, I have it right here. I just moved away because I was looking up. It was Colleen Dewhurst who was originally offered.
Colleen Dewhurst, thank you. She would have been great, right?
Yeah.
She would have done the same thing. I think Colleen would have buried herself in the reality and the tragicness of this character, whereas Francis makes it real, but makes that dialogue pop and snap in a way that I think that Colleen maybe wouldn't do. But it's good casting. I mean, Waterston, Dewhurst, that's good casting. But like in a lot of situations, they landed on the perfect person.
Right. And we were trying to think of Angus McInnes. It's our buddy Angus McFadden, whose name comes into my mind whenever I say Angus. Right.
And I can't get to McGinnis after his name comes in there. So sorry, everyone. That's what goes on in Ryan's brain. Sadly, this show is kind of that's one of the foundations it's built on, we'll just say. So you have to kind of deal with the pluses and the minuses. But
this
Stephen
movie
Burkhoff,
was up. Yeah.
James Sicking,
who
was a silent, sunglasses wearing assassin in Capricorn 1 is Peter Hyams' Lucky Charm. He's in I don't know how many of these. We're going to talk about him at least 3 more times.
Yep.
And James Sicking is fantastic in this film. He plays the corrupt deputy who doesn't want to be corrupt anymore. And it just, if he weren't surrounded by, tools and sellouts, might have been the good guy in a movie. It's a really wonderful, really well fleshed out character that he gets to play, and that he plays really, really well. And even Connery, our hero, is like, no, you just keep taking your money. I don't want you. Yep. I want the big cheese. You know what I mean?
Yep.
It's a tragic character that I really, really love, by an actor who really does get Peter and what he wants. Those two are they must be great friends. They did just tons of films together.
Sure. This movie was up for best sound for the Academy Awards. It also was pretty. It was pretty. Frances Sternhagen won the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films. She won Best Supporting, and this was up for several awards, including Best Science Fiction Film. So, I mean, it was a pretty beloved film in those circles, and why not? It's high noon in space, y'all. I mean, get on board.
Exactly. And again, Peter wrote this. We're gonna somewhere in here. I know exactly where, but somewhere here he's gonna not be writing these anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I promise the show will pick up the pace once he stops being a writer director and just being a director. There's still stuff to talk about, but when you take I don't even want to say his writing, because I think he's involved in the storytelling heavily, even to this day probably. But when you take his dialogue away, his scripting, the way he edits the thing before he's even shot it, you take that away from him, and especially you take that bap, like wise ass characters out of his thing, and the Peter Hyams, the auteur, goes away, and we're left with Peter Hyams, the Hollywood hack. And I say that respectfully, because that's not the worst thing you could be.
Right. But
when I think of films like this, when I think of Francis, when I think of Brenda Vaccaro, you know what I mean? When I think of Richard Masur and Hanover Street, it's Peter. It can only be him. That's wonderful. It's wonderful to create with your own voice. I think it's a magical thing we should celebrate. So.
Okay, so next, and one of the things I wanted to mention here that we should, with Outland, because it's got such these great sequences, is he shoots his own stuff. He's his own DP. That's for the most part on a lot of things. That's
true. It's absolutely true. His editor somewhere around somewhere in the late 90s stopped working with him because it's just too dark. I can't edit this anymore. This is just dark mush. They just had enough. The movies just keep getting darker and darker and darker as they go.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and that's him as his own cinematographer. However, this is the place, and Peter, you mentioned the quote, Peter is this gregarious guy. It's fun to listen to him talk about his own work. But one of the sort of dirty secrets about him, especially in this early days, was that he hires the credited cinematographer for Outland is a great example, is Stephen Goldblatt, who went on to be a renowned cinematographer in the kind of action adventure films. I think he shot the Lethal Weapon films, if I'm not mistaken. So he's very talented. I could be wrong about that, but I think I'm right about it. This was his second job, and he was told to go sit in the corner and not do anything. Hyams he's a photographer for his own work. So, and that was rough, and he would have quit actually if he could have, but he was this new guy who really couldn't quit. But he was extremely insulted by the idea that I'm here for no reason. My name's going to be on this thing, and I'm not actually going to have shot it. I'm not even going to get to collaborate on it. And that was the story that happened. Well, it stopped happening because the union made him stop. At some point here, the union just said, all right, we're sick of dealing with this. You can be your own cinematographer. But it was a union thing where you couldn't be at the time. And I believe it's a union thing where you can't be again. I could be wrong about that, but there was this phase in there where Peter was able to do that, be his own cinematographer. But so I don't want to rip on him, but that is the dark spot on his career from a biographical standpoint, was that he treated these guys, he literally tricked them. Because they could just say yes or no. Maybe he could find a cinematographer who just wanted to take the money and not work. But he found up and coming guys who were really talented, and hired them. Didn't let them shoot the movie, and did let them take the heat if the process of filmmaking slowed down.
Yeah.
So that's kind of not nice. But his point was, and he won the argument ultimately, was, look, I'm shooting these. Let me do it, and we won't have any of this drama, basically. And then they let him do it, and they didn't have any of that drama. So there you go. But Joel's right. Really smart storytelling, really good editorial sense, really good sense of design, guy who writes his own scripts, and a guy who shoots his own movies. That is for a guy that you didn't hear of a lot, that is a movie world renaissance man, truly. I mean, he does it all. So all right, next.
All right, next up is after looking over their calendars and syncing up when they had some time free, James B. Sicking and Hal Holbrook and Peter Hyams then decided, oh, hey, here's some months free. Let's get Michael Douglas, and we're going to shoot The Star Chamber.
Another conspiracy film.
Yeah. Frustrated with the legal system gone haywire, a secret society of judges hires hitmen to snuff out criminals who escape courtroom justice. But one young judge questions the ethics of the vigilante system.
Without getting too far into the weeds, the Star Chamber was a thing in feudal England, essentially, where these high ups in English society, lords and such, would meet in this room, which had little stone stars into the ceiling, the Star Chamber. And if they felt that the English justice system was dragging its feet or didn't achieve something that they wanted that served commerce, or sometimes that where justice, just slipped through the cracks, they would meet, conspire, and act against the criminals and the wrongdoers. And like I say, it's a little more complicated than that, because it's also act in their own economic interests and act, this is a corrupt idea, vigilante justice. But the thing that makes it interesting is that it was done by the people who really are in charge of society at the time. And the Star Chamber is no different. A young prosecutor becomes a judge and is welcomed into the brotherhood of criminal judges and stuff, but he's having cases and he's sort of whining over drinks about how, I don't know what, like, I let this guy go and I had to because of the law, but this sucks. There's no justice here. And they're all like, well, you're just naive or whatever. But Douglas's character is impassioned about this. And this is classic Michael Douglas character, actually, this guy, because his heart's in the right place. He's a really good looking movie star, but he's an everyman in a way that we can relate to. And his desire for something different, something better, something new or more exciting leads him down this path of horrors, just like it does in Fatal Attraction, just like it does in Basic Instinct. You just go on and on and on. We in the era, especially feminists, and the feminist in me to some degree ripped on Michael, because I was like, dude, you play all these just guys who do this horrible crap and pretty much deserve what's coming to them. But I later heard him say, first of all, that's how Hollywood saw me at a certain point. And those were good projects. But secondly, that's what's interesting. You're being corrupted and having to find your way out of it is what's interesting. He deliberately in the 90s played a couple of really heroic guys, and I have to agree with them. They're not bad. He's good at that, but he's more interesting as the other thing. It's just more interesting stuff. So even though this is a lesser known Michael Douglas vehicle, he's the perfect guy to play this judge who the Star Chamber, this other guy, having heard his feelings about it, recruits. And of course, and he goes through a couple things where they literally, like prosecutors, there's judges, they sit in this dark star-shaped table, and there's 9 of them, just like the chief justices of the Supreme Court. I like that. It's a nice touch. And they sit around, and the guy pulls out the file and he makes the case. This guy did this, blah, blah, blah. Here's his history. He's never going to change. He got off on this technicality. What say you? And they're like, yes. And when they say that, suddenly this guy, he's dead in an alley the next day. And he's some criminal, so who gives a crap, basically. Right. Douglas has one of these cases come up, and he kind of, for the movie, kind of hides in the background while we learn what his life is like and everything. But finally he gets a case that he wants to bring to the Star Chamber, and he makes the case, and they all unanimously agree to take this guy down. And Hal Holbrook, again, who's kind of the founder of the feast in this thing, again, perfect, right? He makes the case to him. Look, there's 9 of us. We all have to agree. This is, we're not just murdering people. We're just taking really, really bad players out of society when society isn't able to do it for itself. This is a good thing. It's a dark thing, but who better to hold that responsibility than us? He convinces everybody, convinced me when I was watching the movie. Good idea. Star Chamber. Awesome. They're the heroes. Well, Douglas finds out that this guy that he's nominated for assassination is innocent. He ain't innocent. He's just not guilty of this crime.
Of this particular crime, yeah.
That makes it complicated. And the rest of the movie is cat and mouse, him trying to save the life of this dude who doesn't want his help and is going to kill him if he sees him, this judge at his trial.
Yeah.
And all the other players that come in, and then the Star Chamber the 8 of them having to unanimously agree to take out the judge because he's, so you can see where it's going.
Yeah.
It's great. Dark.
It's fun.
Wow, is it dark? Again, this film has a credited cinematographer who, even the poster, like, it's just these random figures.
It's all black. Yes. You notice that actually after you said how dark it is, and I'm like, yeah, literally every poster here is all dark. It's all on black background. Yep.
Yaphet Kotto, James B. Sicking, again, all these great people doing this well. This is a rather serious and dour film for Peter to have written, but it's very clever and for that kind of film from that era, it's really, really great. It's a great early 80s video show film where you're like, what's this? And you bring it home and you really do get wrapped up in it and swept away by it.
That's exactly how I saw it. That's a pretty astute observation. All right, let's move on to and Star Chamber on the master list comes in at number 7. Number 7. Nope. So next up is all
of the films that Peter wrote made the top 10.
Yeah.
There are 15 of these we're going to talk about.
This next film, he wrote the screenplay, and he worked very closely with the author of the book. And this is a sequel to 2001. And we go 9 years later, which is seems adorable now that we're sitting here in 2022. But we're going to go. He worked with Arthur C. Clarke, and he on 2010, the year we make contact.
2010. You have to say it right. 2010 is not its title. That's an okay way to say the year 2010, but 2010, just 2010, like 2001.
All right, yes. All right. I just wanted to get your blood up a little bit.
Well, you know just how to push my button. 2010, you had me. I almost did it. All right, it's awesome. I love 2010 too. Here's the problem. 2001 is a tone poem made by arguably the greatest visual director that ever lived.
Yeah.
Its meaning is transcendent. Its film craft is unmatched by anything before or since. It can rub you the wrong way because people don't really talk and it's weird and it just doesn't have a nice narrative that you can cling to. Although when things do start clicking in it, they really do click. But it's metaphor and all that layers of meaning that are unspoken, and it can be maddening to people who are used to modern storytelling. But otherwise, we all agree more or less, even those who find it frustrating, that it's an absolute masterpiece of filmmaking, 1968 to 2001, and that it leaves all the meaning of the thing, all of it, for you to figure out and hash out. It requires the audience be engaged on that level and be willing to discuss it afterwards. Arthur C. Clarke, and back in 2001 days, you can't talk about 2001 too much. That's a whole double episode, basically.
Yep.
But Stanley Kubrick, who directed it, wanted to work with a writer hand in hand, and he picked this novelist, Arthur C. Clarke, who, in terms of first contact stories and ideas about aliens and artificial intelligence, he was the top, and still is pretty much the top science fiction writer ever. And they worked together on it. Clarke would write a book, Kubrick would make a film, and then they would be different, but they would be companion pieces to one another. Clarke, many years later, little more than 14 years later, wrote a sequel called 2010, The Year We Make Contact.
Well, the book was called Odyssey 2.
Right.
The book was 2010. The book was,
Odyssey 2 actually would have. Yeah. Odyssey 2 would have made a better title for the film, I think.
Yep. I believe Arthur C. Clarke pronounced it 2010. Odyssey 2.
No, Joel. He did not do that. I will not let you besmirch Arthur C. Clarke.
2010 Odyssey 2, but yeah,
a lot of movies to get through.
Yeah, sorry,
2010 is awesome. It's awesome. It brings back Douglas Rain, the voice of HAL 9000 computer. It brings back Keir Dalia as David Bowman, the crewman of the ill-fated Jupiter mission.
Mm-hmm.
It brings back the main character, ostensibly from the first part of 2001, Dr. Haywood Floyd, but it recasts William Sylvester, who had aged demonstrably, with Roy Scheider. And instead of Kubrick's antiseptic dialogue that William Sylvester makes sing in 2001, but never really is a guy who talks for the whole middle hour of the film and never says anything.
Mm-hmm.
Now we have the same character played by a different actor who's 6.5 inches shorter, has his own personality, and who really, really embraces Peter Hyams' dialogue.
Yeah.
So, as a matter of fact, all these characters do, to one degree or another. But it's a really good movie, starting with the fact that it's Arthur C. Clarke wrote this. So the ideas in this film are hard science fiction, and 2010 is one of the best hard science fiction films ever. Really,
yeah.
It's really, really smart. The ideas in it are really, really clever. If anything undoes it, it's just tonally so different than 2001, and it's just the idea of it. Roger Ebert's like, the idea of a sequel to 2001 just is repellent to me. I hate it. He said he used a great metaphor, Ebert. He's like, it reminds me of the little boy who broke open his drum to see how the sound was made. This film, everything that 2001 leaves to your imagination, this film has somebody explain to you explicitly. All the mysteries are solved. Everything, the meaning of everything comes to the surface. In a way, it's a great tonic if you're frustrated by 2001, because it's more of the same, but it just gives you a traditional narrative. Scheider's fantastic in it. It's one of he's really, really great in this role.
He's really, really good in this. Yeah.
There's guys who really, really make the Peter Hyams-ness of it, not the Arthur C. Clarke-ness so much.
No,
the Peter Hyams-ness of it, saying Dana Elcar shows up at the beginning from TV's MacGyver. He's fantastic, saying Peter Hyams like smart-assy things. John Lithgow is fantastic in it.
But even Roy Scheider gets to say the kind of the Peter Hyams smart. I mean, he gets to say all of this stuff, but he does all that. He kind of has that face of there's so much, like there's that great scene where he's just sitting around, he's talking all about the trip to Jupiter and everything like that, and he just kind of delivering it. His glasses are like the half glasses here, and he's just
right.
And he's just kind of like, and he just delivers all of this dialogue, but he's just kind of got this face of like, yeah.
It's a Cold War movie. That's what Hyams brought to it.
Yeah.
It's a joint Russian-U.S. space mission during 1984 now, the height of the movie stage play Cold War. The height of the Cold War is probably back in the 60s someplace in reality. Yeah. But by 84, we were really, really good at dramatizing it, I guess is what I want to say. So so it's got that in it, and that actually, when you watch it now, feels relevant again in a weird way, even though the nomenclature has changed. Those, that on the brink of war for seemingly no reason, for purely ideological reasons, feels relevant. So that's kind of interesting. It is Helen Mirren's first role. She plays the commander, the Russian commander of the thing. She's great in it. She doesn't get to say anything funny in it, so she's really got to hold down the fort. But she's great though, and it's great that Clark wrote a female commander, and it's great that Hollywood stuck with it, and it's awesome that they found, Dame Helen Mirren, plucked her off the stage, put her in it. She's genius. Lithgow's always good. The relationship between Lithgow and Ilya Baskin, if you don't know Ilya by name, trust me, you know him when you see him. Is wonderful. The friendship between this American and this Russian cosmonaut, this American engineer. He's not an astronaut. That definitely plays into the Lithgow's character. It's not supposed to be floating around in space. He's designed all this stuff and he knows what it all is, but what am I doing up here? That comes home to roost, like, in a really key moment. And I love Ilya Baskin. Whenever he shows up and stuff, but this might be my favorite role of his. He's in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies. He's Peter's landlord, if that helps you guys. And he was the cutest, cuddliest Russian guy of the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
He just was. Each successive movie, the other movie in 1984, Moscow on the Hudson, he's just huggable and lovable. And then the third, the real ringer, I think, is Bob Balaban. Now, Bob Balaban plays a guy named, who is always awesome. He plays a guy named Dr. Chandra, who's supposed to be Indian, as you can imagine, or, East Indian, of Indian extraction. He's an American, but,
Right.
They cast Balaban, who's brilliant. He plays this weird, mousy, I only have relationships with computers guy. He was the designer and original teacher of the HAL 9000, and he comes along on this mission to reactivate HAL to try and help them figure out what happened. Richard Edlund, hot off of Return of the Jedi. Richard did all the space effects in Return of the Jedi, which are astounding even to this day. Richard does the space effects. He makes Jupiter come to life in an extremely believable way. Everything in 2010, even though the dialogue may be cheesier and everything may be explicit, everything in it, outside that, there's maybe a few, Joel, back me up on this, there's probably a few too many buttons on the Leonov spacecraft, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Nothing needs that many colored buttons, surely.
Yeah, it was this idea that, the whole thing was the future. This was when they were still saying that, the more powerful the computer, the larger room you need. And the more things that will have to happen.
But it's funny that when they get to the Jupiter and they go inside and you're back on Kubrick sets.
Yeah.
There's no buttons anywhere. It's elegant and clean and nice. Whereas the Leonov is right out. It's great design of a ship, but it's right out of Alien. Basically, it's low ceilings. Everyone's huddled together at these little tables. Everything's got multi-purposes. Everybody sleeps in these little glass cubes. That film's full of humanity, though. It's got too many voiceovers, and it does have some flaws. It's not a masterpiece. That's its biggest flaw. It's a big, broad entertainment for 1984. It absolutely works on that level. Even Ebert, who did nothing but rip on it, his review got to the bottom. He's like, taken on its own terms, 3 out of 4 stars, basically. So he gave it a positive.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he was like, it's not where I was just looking here, and he said. It doesn't match the poetry, but it does continue the story and offers sound. His biggest thing is he didn't like the ending. He thought the ending was too soft, essentially too, hunky dory.
Rum-de-tum marchy.
Yeah, without ruining it. If there are people out here who haven't seen 2010,
surely there are.
Yep. So,
but it. Yeah, it is a soft landing. As a matter of fact, we won't go into it. We need to move on. We got all tons of movies left to do. But this film was again, Clark and Hyams worked really, really directly on it. The one bit of fun trivia about it was outside of academia, they were the first two people in the film industry to use email as a way of communicating with one another.
Yeah.
Because they were far apart. I think Clark was retired and living in Kuala Lumpur or something, someplace very exotic, and Hyams is out in Hollywood typing away, and they had this dialogue back and forth that was immediate. They didn't have to write letters, and they didn't have to make long distance phone calls. Somebody Clark knew suggested that they use this new technology, so I think that's kind of fun.
That is cool.
It's a good movie. It's Hyams' best movie, as Joel is about to tell you. It's the film where, you know, his career built up to this film, and it's all downhill after this. This is the film where if you nail this one, you're the next Spielberg. You know what I mean? If you don't nail it, you're gonna have to find another path where they're not gonna let you do this kind of thing anymore.
Right.
Hyams, in classic tradition, really, of what his filmology is, filmography, he didn't do either. He didn't botch it, and he didn't nail it. It was a hit, but it wasn't a monster hit. You know, it was a hit. The movie that came out the next week was Dune. Dune was a flop. And similarly priced.
Here's the thing: is if this movie isn't a direct sequel to 2001, if this movie is just like Jupiter Trip, or just its own standalone thing, if it had nothing to do, now I mean obviously the movie is very different, but if it somehow wasn't connected to this masterpiece,
it would be among the most beloved science fiction films of the 80s, no doubt.
Indeed.
And for the people who really like it or would really like it, weren't connected to it because they may not have liked 2001. It's a film that works, but doesn't work great if you haven't seen 2001. Right. So there's that. There's this baggage that comes with it. Even if you didn't like 2001, or even if you didn't worship at it, it is not ever allowed to be its own thing, and it is never ever pokes its head out from underneath the shadow of this other deal.
Yeah.
But for a commercial filmmaker who just wants to entertain people, it is highly entertaining. The effects are amazing. The cinematography is really, really well done. The settings that they use in the real world are fantastic. I could just go out, all the bit players, Deschanel and Madeline Smith, and Candice Bergen shows up in a cameo as a computer. It's just really smart. Everything's treated with lots of importance, and it looks glorious. It looks as glorious as anything they would make today, maybe better than a lot of things, because the model work, and I just can't stress this enough, Jupiter is such a looming beast of a thing visually, and it's just so amazingly real and come to life in this film in a way maybe CGI could do, but in a way that if you had CGI you would overdo it.
Right. No, that's a great point.
Which would take some of its power away, I think. This film uses it when it needs it, and it nails it every time. Truly hats off to Richard Edlund for incredible effects work. And David Shire, who scored the thing. David's not my favorite composer, unless we're talking musical theater, then I love him. But for films, I don't love him because he's a little weepy and whatever. But he replaced Tony Banks from Genesis at the last second and really had to write what you're hearing very, very quickly. And so under those circumstances, at least he got to the emotional moment and such and did a pretty great job. So 2010.
Yeah, and of course, and I probably should surprise the listener not at all that 2010, the year we make contact, is the number one Peter Hyams film on our list.
It really is.
So way to go, Pat, for everybody on that one.
It really is, and it shows you the tragedy of the fact that his best movie is a sequel to some much more celebrated filmmaker's best movie.
Sure,
you know what I mean? It's like this. And it's not that that's tragic. It is a little, but it's that this is it. This is where you top out. That part of it is kind of sad because I think he might have had other ambitions, but we're going to speed round the rest of these bad
Yeah,
boys.
because literally, we have, it's been the roller coaster ride where we're going click, 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 click up to the top. Now things head downwards in a pretty quick manner.
But I think it is one of those roller coasters where you have the fake dip before you really go down.
Yeah, because there are some okay films coming up, but there are some stinky
turds,
trash here.
couple.
Yeah. All right. Next up is this is actually the first one on here that he directed that he did not write. This movie,
that's significant.
It's significant. It also this movie takes a couple things. This movie was very important to not important. I mean, this is a movie I watched a ton when I was a kid. This was and this is Billy Crystal at his goofiest. And the one thing that has been missing from all of these Peter Hyams films, Dan Hedaya. We finally get some Dan Hedaya.
Surely Dan Hedaya.
Surely
will enhance this experience. Yeah, no doubt.
And it does have a great the tagline is two of Chicago's finest. You got the great poster where they're standing in front of this old LTD or whatever, these two guys. Crystal's got his Cubs shirt on, and they just look like a couple of narc loser cops, and their car has spray painted along the side of it, undercover police car. Unmarked police car. Two streetwise Chicago cops have to shake off some rust. I mean,
that's visually, right? That tells you everything about this movie that you need to know. It is a really, really great poster. That tagline is a fantastic tagline. So they come back from Key West to pursue a drug dealer who nearly killed them in the past. And it, of course, is Running Scared. Running Scared. Without going too into the plot of this, I'm really going to not do that this time.
No.
The only thing I will say is that this script is written for two old cops being pulled out of retirement to solve a crime against somebody. They have a thing. It was supposed to be old guys in retirement, and they changed it to Peter Hyams went into the producer's room and was like, instead of old guys, what if it was young guys getting called back from vacation? And the producer said, now you're speaking our language, Peter Hyams. Young guys, it could be there's some hot chicks in it. He's like, well, we'll see. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it was written apparently for Gene Hackman and Paul Newman.
That would have been great. Holy Moses, that would have been good.
But that would have been a good
movie. As it is, this is not a great movie, but it's certainly not a bad one. It is really, really enjoyable because as soon as he said young guys, they were like, yeah, who could it be? Tom Cruise and blah, blah, blah. And they ended up with Billy Crystal, who wasn't really a big star yet, and Gregory Hines, who wasn't a star really of any kind. He'd been in stuff, but Gregory was known for foisting his personality on these supporting roles.
Essentially, yeah.
Which is what they both do here. This is Billy Crystal and Gregory Hines unfiltered. So even though Hyams didn't write the script, he took the script. He didn't much honor even the central premise of the thing, and he let these two guys who were prone to zaniness and improvisation and just let them go off. And sometimes, like in White Men Can't Jump, that's a disaster, and it's a big, horrible thing. And sometimes it's magic. And in this case, that's really the magic of the thing.
It's
lots of action. Old Chicago, old grimy criminal Chicago is really captured on film in a great, great way. The buddy cop, I mean, you can't do anything new with that, but what they do is still wonderful between these two guys. Big cliffhangy, actiony sequence at the end of the thing. It pushes all the buttons. It knows all the stuff it wants to do. Peter wanted a big hit. He didn't get a big hit. He got a mild hit. But it is a film. I look back on it very fondly, and I didn't love it at the time. You really loved it at the time and still love it.
It was one of those go-to movies. It was a Nookie Blanky movie.
It's good stuff, really. It doesn't have the storytelling ambition of some of these prior works, but it's good stuff, truly. Of that kind of film, it's hard to think. Stakeout maybe is a little better, but it's really good. It's really good.
It's a silly, fun film. What
Where did it come in?
Running Scared comes in at number 4. Comes in at number 4.
Good job.
Yeah. Next up, not silly fun, but another one that he did not write, but directed, and this one is The Presidio.
Yeah, with Sean Connery again. See, Sean must like Peter. He came back to do this. This was supposed to be Sean Connery and Kevin Costner not reprising their roles, but reprising their relationship from Untouchables. That's part of the reason Connery liked his experience on Outland, and really, you could tell he really returned a favor to the people who worked with him and cast him throughout his rough years. You know what I mean? When he became a star again, he really kind of turned his back. And this was the first time he did that. So Presidio is a military base on the very tip of the San Francisco Bay, like it comes out to a tip, basically, the Candlestick area. And there's a murder happens there. What happens if a murder happens at the White House? What happens if a murder happens? It's one of those. It's really, and that's really all it is. The fun thing is that these two guys have a relationship. Costner didn't show up. He had other things he got wrapped up in. He really was going to do this movie, and it would have been a decent role for him. But at that time, it probably would have been a bit of a step back for him. They got the made-for-TV Kevin Costner and Mark Harmon to step in after they'd gone through a whole bunch of other names. And Mark, great in this. This is a good role for Mark. Actually, really, really good role for him. This is about as A-list as he got in anything, as far as I'm aware. Or as much as he flirted with it. But he's great. You have this contentious relationship. Meg Ryan's in it too. Mark Harmon's dating her. She's Connery's daughter. There's military history between the two. But they have to get over their differences and solve this murder together, because you can't just be the cop solving it, because it's on the military base, so you need a military liaison to solve it, blah, blah, blah. And then it goes through the motions of a late 80s murder mystery cop thriller, basically, till you get to the end. It's got some interesting cinematography, very dark, the way the Presidio is shaded as this dark, gloomy place, which it really isn't. It's a tiny little place that isn't even a military base anymore. But it's one of those kind of iconic trappings that serve a conventional story like this pretty well. But this, and the stars are good. It really helps. Connery, I mean, if it were somebody else, who knows, so I like it, but I don't love it. Yeah, and I feel the same. I'm sitting here and I've seen it 4 times or something, and I'm sitting here and I can't really remember how it plays out. Like, it's that kind of movie where, in a way, it's nice. It's like a Law and Order episode. You watched it. Yeah, I know I've seen this one before, but I don't remember what happens. And that's what the Presidio kind of is. It's like, I remember the relationships, and I remember, the fight in the laundry, whatever room. I remember that. I remember some other things, but I can't, for the life of me, I can't remember what this murder is about or what anything is here. So you get to be surprised by the ending again. That's kind of neat.
Yay. Next up is Narrow Margin. Now, this is one that he did. He comes back and he writes this. Of the movies that we're going to talk about, this is the last one that he writes. So it's called it's got Gene Hackman, Ann Archer, James B. Sicking, and it's called Narrow Margin.
I love Narrow Margin. I just did something I would never, ever do, Joel. I texted during the show. I apologize for that. I apologize to you. I apologize to the audience. I apologize to Mr. Hyams. I apologize to everyone who has been waiting patiently for Narrow Margin to finally come up on the list.
You apologize to James Sicking.
James B. Sicking. Oh, my God. What's his affectation in this film? Do you remember?
I do not.
It's the bright yellow marksman sunglasses. You know what I'm talking about? The yellow lenses. Those make him evil. I love it. I love Narrow Margin. I don't know where I rated it amongst these objectively, but this was a great thing for Peter to do. This is smart. What can I do next? I'm not really sure. Well, let's do what we say you should do. instead of looking at properties I have the rights to and remaking a famous one that was already an awesome movie for 1990, let me look at movies that I have the rights to that were good, but maybe weren't great and didn't get all the attention that they could have deserved or that their premise could have lived up to. Narrow Margins, the story of a woman, poor woman, on a blind date, witnesses a murder and gets involved in a conspiracy. She's played by Ann Archer. Her date, I kind of ruined this, but this happens at the beginning. Her date's played brilliantly by J.T. Walsh, always welcome. He's a guy where he would have been, could have been in any of these movies and he'd been great.
Yeah.
He slides right in. Their date is fantastic. Hyams stuff. And now she's running scared, not to steal a previous film's title, but I mean, she's on her own. There's a federal marshal that's dispatched to bring her in as a witness to this, who kind of figures out what's happening, played by Gene Hackman. Fantastic in this film. This film's just a cheesy chase movie, but it's really, the chase part is great. The action is fantastic. There's a car chase in it, the likes of which you've never seen in a film before and will never see. And that sort of storytelling ambition is very much part of this. But I'm telling you, what it's got that no other movie that I can think of has is James B. Sicking in them yellow shades, man. He is such an upright, double-breasted douchebag of a villain, and him and Hackman's stuff just sparkles. They're little. They only have a couple of talkie scenes together. They're mostly shooting at each other, but it just is wonderful. They find themselves on a train in Canada that's running across the bottom of the U.S.-Canadian border, and they got to survive on the train until they get to where they can get help. It's gloriously simple thriller formula film, and there's twists and turns and surprises, and Ann Archer and Gene Hackman's dialogue is actually more contentious than Sicking's and Hackman's, because at least they understand who each other are in this game. You know what I mean? Like I don't want to say it's mutual respect, because Hackman keeps sort of digging at Sicking in this sort of great way, but there's like, well, we know what we are. With Hackman and Archer, it's like, what? You're not going to survive like on your own. And she's like, well, you're not capable of saving me. And that tension is loaded in the thing. And I love Narrow Margin. It's a film that's been treated on home video and on television really, really horribly. It's a film that takes place on a train. You have to watch it in scope. You have to watch it in widescreen. You just flat out have to watch it that way. If you take that away and you cut it in half, it's a straight to video piece of garbage. If you open it up and you really see what he shot and the way he told the story, it's as good as any movie made during this. It's maybe not like Fugitive good, but it's really, really good. So I love Narrow Margin, and more people should check that out now that you can watch it properly.
Well, Narrow Margin comes in
remake of the Richard Fleischer film from the 50s. Sorry.
Sure. Okay. It comes in at number 5 on our Peter to Hyams list. Did I mention that Presidio was number 6? So this one comes in and edges out Presidio
a little bit, because the energy, it's just a less derivative. Even though it's the remake, it's the less derivative thing for its time.
Sure.
And Hackman, man, it's a great workman like Hackman performance. You know, this film, The Package, there's a whole bunch that came out around this time where he's just awesome. You know, he's not Oscar-winning awesome, but he's really, really good consistently through all this stuff.
Yep. Next up is Peter Hyams doing a little kind of wacky, crazy comedy, high concept comedy. And this one stars I love John Ritter. I will always love John Ritter. He makes me so happy.
Well, they tried to get all the stars they could get. This is one of those films where you look at this is the males considered, this is the females considered, and it's everybody. It's everybody who was making money making movies at this time in the early 90s. And the masterstroke of it, because we're not going to spend much time on this, the masterstroke of it, I suppose, is the high concept idea, which is fun.
Yep.
Although it doesn't make me laugh much, which means it's a failure. It makes me grin a little bit, that's not enough for a film that has this kind of energy to it.
Right.
It's a film that, like, if Joe Dante made it or somebody like that, it might have really worked, because he might have really went for it. Hyams, he does it, but he's not that director, so he's not able to really go for it. But the master stroke, other than two poor people get trapped in this grisly, cynical world of television that sort of represents our that dark talk show contest era of the early 90s, reality TV, is that he cast two sitcom superstars, Pam Dauber and John Ritter. And I'm telling you, I cannot think and I've only seen this a couple of times, but I cannot think when I'm watching it of who could have possibly been better than these two in this film. That you really can't take a movie star and make them John Ritter and Pam Dauber. You just can't. And they both are. Also, I think you might have caught a superstar actor slumming in this, and they don't ever give that impression that this is cheap or silly stuff. They play it totally straight. They play the horror of it, and that's the only reason it works to me on any level. Yeah. But I don't love it. It's a comedy that doesn't make me laugh.
And that is a problem. No, you're
I like that it's
right.
high concept. I like what it's trying to say, but we talked about Scrooge kind of in the same way. That's another film. It's trying to say something, but it doesn't really manage to say it. And this film suffers from kind of the same problems, and it doesn't have a big comic superstar in it.
That's a great point. Yeah, that's a great comparison. Scrooge
kind of died on the vine a little bit.
Yep. All right. So next up, rated? Well, it on our list. Stay Tuned comes in at number 11.
Not bad.
11. So next up is I have no pithy way to bring us into this. It's Time Cop. It's Jean-Claude Van Damme.
We got a two-hitter Jean-Claude Van Damme double feature here. Yes, and if you're going to watch a Jean-Claude Van Damme double feature, you could do worse than these two movies. Matter of fact, all but two others are worse than these two. So they're not the best Peter Hyams movies, folks. Sorry. But they are amongst the best Jean-Claude Van Damme films, starting with Time Cop, a guy who goes around, travels through time, and stops basically people from stealing throughout time. It doesn't really get much more complicated than that. You want it to be about a cop who sets the timeline straight and maintains the integrity of history, but really it's just a good guy chasing bad guys by time traveling and keeping them from stealing. Am I wrong about that, or that?
No, I mean the stealing is, the stealing is in service to try to control the future to gain all this power and money.
But this film doesn't manage demonstrating that, unfortunately. No. It's got a fun turn by Ron Silver as a villain, which he's only played once or twice. He's pretty fun in it. Van Damme is pretty good, although it's really just a cheap Van Damme actioner with these science fiction trappings. To call this some sort of science fiction movie or like a science fiction classic is a mistake, because it's got some neat set design and some cool ideas, but it doesn't. It's like Stay Tuned. It's high concept and it doesn't really deliver on the concept. What it delivers on is, here's another way to do another Jean-Claude Van Damme film. Right. And in that way, it is a success, because here's another way to do a Jean-Claude Van Damme film. That's not easy. We got to keep making these, couple of them every year, and to find a new way to do it is a challenge. Otherwise, they're all the same damn thing. And then you're Steven Seagal, basically, and nobody wants that. So during this era, Jean-Claude, with the help of Peter, sort of avoided that. But that's all I want to say about Time Cop.
Sure, because we're going to have to talk more about Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Did I say that it was super, super dark? It's really, really dark.
It's really, really dark. It's really dark. Time Cop is the number 12 list. 12 on the list. This one, the next up though, you know what Time Cop, where Time Cop had time travel, Peter Hyams went, okay, well, we can't do time travel again. What if we do hockey? And
I prefer you call it ice hockey for the term.
Ice hockey.
I'm not sure what other kinds of hockey there are, but I really do.
Oh, there's field. There's field hockey. Yeah. Ice hockey. Terror goes into overtime in sudden death.
Sudden death is Die Hard in an ice hockey arena during the Stanley Cup. That's all it is. It's as simple as that. The vice president is there. There's a hostage situation, and a fireman, French-Canadian, former hockey-playing fireman, is taking his kids to the Stanley Cup Finals to watch the Penguins play. I want to say the Kings. I'm not sure who, but it takes place in Pittsburgh, and the Penguins are the stars of the film to some degree.
Mm-hmm.
And some guys or some gal, and I think it was a gal largely on this script that's got a few different writers, sat down and was like, well, how many ways can you kill a henchman using hockey related things? And the answer turned out to be 36. There's a 36 person body count in this film, and Jean-Claude Van Damme kills every single one of them. Spoiler alert for Sudden Death. The thing that Sudden Death has that Time Cop doesn't have, because it's certainly not a better movie, is you can have fun with Sudden Death. You can have a lot of fun with Sudden Death if you come into it in the right frame of mind. And yet it's the idea initially was to make a parody of the Die Hard films in this setting. And they don't. They have Van Damme, who can't be put in a parody. He has to play it straight. That's all. That's the only thing he's super good at, really, other than like drop kicking people.
Right.
Or I guess roundhouse kicking them would be more his thing. But they play it straight, and because they play it straight, it's funnier and more fun as a result. Powers Booth is the bad guy in it. He's fantastic. Again, he was like their 10th choice, but he was exactly the right guy. Right. The movie, Raymond J. Barry's in it, some other folks, but the movie's fun. It's weird. His family, his little girl and whatever are like wrapped up in this thing. It's all shot on location during a hockey lockout, the NHL lockout, in the Civic Arena in Pittsburgh and around Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's a very cinematic place. Lots of hills, lots of crooked buildings, like on all these bluffs and things, and lots of tunnels, lots of rivers. It's just lots of bridges. It's just a very cool place to shoot a movie, and this film has a lot going for it in it in terms of action, but you can't call it good. It isn't good at all. Even on the list of Die Hard ripoffs, it's not high on the list. So where's it ranked?
You put this one at number 9.
Number 9. If you don't mind everyone getting killed, it's you really can have fun with Sudden Death. That's the caveat. It's absurd amount of people meet their doom in this thing. It's an absurd amount. It is a really, really violent film, but that's the point. That's the point of the Die Hard ripoffs. I mean, that's the point. They push it all too far, and that's the fun of it. But it's fun like RoboCop is fun. You know, you laugh and you are shocked, but you do need a shower afterwards. Yeah, so just be warned.
All right, next up is 1997's The Relic, and I believe The Relic has made a previous appearance on this show before. If I remember correctly, I think it might have. But anyway, a homicide detective and an anthropologist try to destroy a South American lizard-like god who's on a people-eating rampage in a Chicago museum.
Oh my God, whoever wrote that synopsis. Yep. God bless you. That's awesome. A people-eating rampage. Technically, this guy doesn't want to eat people. He just wants to eat your hypothalamus. Is that too much to ask, folks? This movie is, for a monster movie, is grisly. It's really dark and grisly. It's Lincoln Child and Douglas Preston novel. It's not, I don't think it was their debut novel, or maybe it was, but it was the debut of a lot of their ideas that they've continued throughout their 8 million novels together. It's got a great Stan Winston creature in it. The digital effects aren't quite up to realizing it. And the suit that they created was apparently very hard to work with. But Hyams brings it together, to his credit. He makes it work. He hides it in the shadows, which dare I say, The Relic is the darkest movie on this list.
It might be the darkest one, because it's all like, in this, Yeah,
it's saying a lot, Joel, to say that.
It's so dark because it's just all in the. It's in a museum at night.
It's in a dark, the Field Museum in Chicago. The book takes place in New York, but New York Museum of Natural History would have nothing to do with this film. But sure. Chicago read it, and they were like, "This is awesome! A monster in our museum!" Like they had the exact opposite reaction. They're like, "Well, the New York Museum said the kids would be scared to go to the museum because of this." They're like, "What? Come on! Nobody comes to the museum." Bring it on, you know what I mean? It's like, and the museum is a character in the thing. It's got a strong female character, Penelope Ann Miller plays her. It's got a very fun, wisecracking cop played by Tom Sizemore. Vincent D'Augusta, great Chicago name, and his partner played by Romer. Can't remember his name.
Clayton Rohner.
Clayton Rohner, he's great in it too. Linda Hunt's in it. She plays the curator of the museum. She's great in it. It's a monster movie, and they're all taking it super serial, and so you don't have to. I mean, that's the gift of a monster movie to me, really. This isn't a good movie either. It isn't. The thing looks fake when it's digital. It looks crazy fake when it's on fire. The idea of it, like digging through people's spines to take the hypothalamuses out of their brains, right, is horrific, and the forensics that surround that idea are awful. But there's some mystical, otherworldly magic to it too. The premise behind it is good. Preston and Child are good, right? They're good, like Michael Crichton-esque writers. And this film, each step of the way, has some of these great ideas, and it has these moments of profound violence. It has not one, but usually you get one. But it has two sort of mass casualty sequences in it that are, they're, for what they are really, really horrible, and just show you how unprepared humanity is for this kind of thing. And I like it. I mean, because I like a good old fashioned monster movie whose heart is in the right place. It wants to thrill and scare you, but it softens a couple of the novel's harshest things, but it is a harsh movie. That's the thing I remember when I walked out of it was, that's not, I was expecting sort of Jurassic Park light kind of thing. I was not expecting this. This was, I don't know how many people bite it in this thing or get their heads chopped off by this creature, but it's a lot. It's a lot more than you are expecting.
All right, let's move on to one of the things that I think Peter Hyams is great at is he asks questions like, what if Satan just really needed love and needed a bride,
so that he could create a child so that he could rule the earth.
So, but maybe that's what it would take for Satan to just chill out. Peter Hyams asks that question with Arnold Schwarzenegger in End of Days.
End of Days, one of a trilogy of 1999 devil-related films.
Indeed.
And is it the worst one? I'm gonna say Stigmata is the worst one, but it's really a pick 'em. The best one is definitely Ninth Gate. Correct. With Johnny Depp. This maybe falls in the middle somewhere. It's got some pretty good. It's got a crazy good Schwarzenegger action scene early on in it, which I don't know that even belongs in this movie, but it makes the movie feel bigger and more eventful, I think, than it would otherwise.
Sure.
It's got Schwarzenegger, who's game to have a hit, even though this wasn't it. He really is trying his hardest. But it's what? It's cheap. The Relic is a mean-spirited film by design. But this film is like a cheap kind of exploitative thing. And I think maybe that's my reaction to the devil needs to breed sort of plot line of it. Yeah. Our heroine, played by Robin Tunney, is naked for no reason twice. I guess, to make her vulnerable on screen or something, you can come up with whatever excuse. But if you don't have a real reason, then why is this happening? It makes me feel this isn't the time to bring this up, but here's my take in a nutshell. Rob once asked a brilliant question. Rob's super fan. Thank you for asking. This is very smart because culturally it's a very different thing. But what is the difference between violence? Why is violence so celebrated in our films? I just raved about The Relic. It's not even good. And it's super violent. And why are we so scared of sex and nudity and stuff? And I think what it comes down to is when I see Rob and Tunney topless down some long corridor where the devil is coming for her, I get what that's supposed to do to my brain from a storytelling standpoint, but all I see is an actor naked for no reason and what went into that. I can promise you that if you go through all the deaths that have ever happened on screen in Hollywood history.
Yeah, there were 36 of them in Time and Sudden Death alone. And
Sudden Death alone. If you go back through all of them, you will find maybe a few stories, but hardly any stories of people complaining about being exploited personally.
Right.
If you go through all the nuded scenes and all the boobs that you've ever seen in a movie, there will be at least half, and I think that's an extremely conservative figure, at least half of them are people being exploited for their bodies, for their sex appeal, for the naughtiness of the thing. And that is a hurtful, ugly, harmful thing. That's a dark thing that goes on in Hollywood. And this film has just too much of that. And I made it me really hard to get into it. That, and in the end, it's just the plot of The Omen, except not nearly as good, without a child, without a loving father. Instead, you've got Schwarzenegger, who's a hard-ass detective who becomes a believer in all this stuff. Yeah. Kevin Pollak helps when he's on screen, but he doesn't help enough.
I felt exploited when the movie The Musketeer came out, because I felt like that was taking a story that's a lot of fun and just making me feel like, I don't, why do I hate this? I'm supposed to like this story. This is a dumb movie. But that's The Musketeer for you.
That's The Musketeer for you, baby.
So
of course, the premise of The Musketeer and the point of The Musketeer, sorry, I'm bidding on something on eBay. This is a shameful show. It's a shameful show, and I'm ashamed, but F it, I'm doing it. I want to win this thing. So it's, y'all. Can you
share what it is that you're trying to win?
Well, we'll see if I win or lose. We'll know.
All right, next week. And
this Peter Hyams show is going to go over 2 hours, which shows you he's sort of an epic guy. More than I thought, more than I wanted even, but whatever. What are we talking about? The Musketeer? Here, I'll boil it down for you. Crap version of The Musketeer. What Joel's saying in his seguedness is spot on. This film has no reason to exist except for the fight choreography of then hottest guy on the planet, Chingwei, what's his name? I already screwed it up, so I might as well screw it up.
Yeah, it is
the guy who did the Matrix films, the guy who did Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, he does the sword fighting fight choreography in this version of the Three Musketeers. And on its own, I still don't love it because it's so off the wall crazy, which the sword fighting in Three Musketeers really should be traditionally swashbuckling and not. There's this scene where they're sword fighting on ladders that are like tipping over, and it's crazy, and it is diverting. But the part they screwed up was the Alexander Dumas part. How do you screw that up? We're still waiting for an ultimate version of Three Musketeers that isn't dramatically compromised in some sort of way. We're still waiting, and that's stupid because it's super. Richard Lester didn't do it. I'm sorry, with respect to you baby boomers who love that crap. It's not bad, but it isn't good. The Stephen Herrick, Charlie Sheen, Kiefer Sutherland one, that gets the job done, but it's not good. Why? The closest thing you get is Man in the Iron Mask, and even that's like...
I don't even like that one. A Sound of Thunder is the final movie on our Musketeer, to no one's surprise, comes in at 15 at the very
worst
bottom
film on this list, because I get why Hyams had to do it, and he does it with his usual visual flair, but the film has nothing but visual flair, and it's an hour and 40 minutes. It's this epic thing told in this tiny, stupid way where the only thing happening in it of any value is a gimmick. That is a film and a story that's sold down the river for commercial reasons, and as you'd expect, it was a big bomb.
Right. Do you remember when Edward Burns was trying to be it? When they were trying to make Edward Burns a thing, like he was going to be.
Burns is a good actor.
He's a good actor, but they were going to we got to put him in like an action film because we got to get him in like a tight shirt and stuff like that. Well, they in A Sound of Thunder, a single mistake in the past passed by a time travel company in the future has devastating and unforeseen consequences.
This is a Michael Crichton ripoff story, although it's a very famous Sound of Thunder. Who wrote it? The
Ray Bradbury
story or whatever. Ray Bradbury. Okay, so it's a very famous Ray Bradbury story, but it's very. This is a cheap version of Jurassic Park. Peter Hyams, Ed Burns. This film bankrupted Franchise Pictures, which is the worst offshoot movie shingle in the history of movies. They made Driven with Sylvester Stallone. They made Battlefield Earth with John Travolta. They basically took old aging stars. They did a movie with Schwarzenegger that was equally bad. I don't remember what it was. They took old aging stars and workmen-like filmmakers like Hyams, and they stuck them in their old aging star passion projects, which were very expensive and that nobody wanted to see, and that none of them made money. And this was the one where it's finally like, we're halfway through this movie. Franchise Pictures is no more. You can't have any more money. This thing's dead. That's the kind of production we're talking about. So given that, it's remarkable how decent and watchable it is, because Warner Brothers a couple years later kind of finished the effects in standard definition on computers very cheaply. They all look terrible, but the film visually was told in a way and storyboarded in a way that even when you plunk the bad visual effects in it, the storytelling gets told. It works visually. But the story is this high concept place to make money, takes these guys back into time, thousands and thousands of years, to dinosaurs, and they allow them to hunt them and kill them. And it's just one dinosaur that they keep killing over and over and over again with these ice bullets made of ice, so that it doesn't leave any trace of technology behind.
All right.
And it's the same dinosaur. This dinosaur is about to get stuck in a bog right as a volcano erupts and kills him. So they just keep shooting him, and then he falls down in the bog, it's dead, and then they leave, and then the volcano erupts and covers up the crime of history that they're doing. But of course, Joel, something goes wrong one of those times. They go in.
That's going to happen.
Something happens where the guns don't work right, or the timeline gets changed and they get sent back at not exactly the perfect time. And there's this big sort of T-Rex attacks action sequence, and the future, 2055, I believe this film takes place in, starts changing. And Bradbury's story, I won't ruin the details for you. It's out there. The way the future changes is weirdly specific. And they capture that on film to the degree that they can with this non-effects budget for this big effects movie.
Right.
I find it's not crap. It's watchable. Ben Kingsley plays the evil business guy. Catherine McCormick, I want to say, is in it. She's pretty decent. She's a good actor. Ed Burns is a good actor. So McCormick and Burns, they're kind of doing the heavy lifting dramatically in the film. And they're doing what they do best, which is keeping this stuff grounded in something meaningful and playing the reality of it. And if they weren't doing that, this film would be a laughable disaster. As it is, it's a sad, you feel sorry for it disaster. And that's not great, but that's better than the alternatives. So This film is what?
Number 14.
Hey, the penultimate.
The penultimate
bad films on the Peter Hyams list. And he's done a few since. And like I said, he did a few before. And it's sad to end with, because this was a film with some real ambition. If it had a big effects budget, it still would have been a flop probably, but it would have been a flop that was accomplished and that we thought, but the fact that it didn't come out when it was supposed to, it came out years later. It only came out on video. The video effects look pretty good on old TVs, but look terrible on new TVs. So, it looked terrible in high definition because they're not even really rendered in high definition.
Right.
But I like Hyams, and I can feel it. I can feel it working. I know what that was supposed to look like. You know what I mean? And so I don't mind it so much. And I like a good
Yeah.
Bradbury, I like a good don't step on a butterfly in the past sort of tale. That's fun.
Yep.
Boy, the cars in 2055 are going to suck, though, you guys. Buy all the cars you can now, because it's weird yellow dune buggy city in 2055.
No, dune buggy city. Oh, no. Sum up what Peter Hyams...
It feels like the highways... First of all, it feels like the street out front of this building is a highway, which isn't. This is a street.
Sure.
Cars are going way too fast. And it feels like all the cars are like those airport trolleys and things, those weird cars that are only at airports.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, they're not real. They're weird. They don't look like anything that we would evolve into naturally. So
indeed.
Yeah, if they were yellow dune buggies, hey, if they were talking yellow dune buggies with personalities, they might actually had something here.
Oh my God, that would have been amazing.
To think about.
So we talked at the top of the show. We talked about Peter Hyams, and we're in this.
I won
these workmen. Awesome. These workman-like directors.
You're no longer interested.
Well, we got to end this show. We've spent way too long talking about some mediocre films.
I know.
And but we wanted to honor like these workman directors who they're not the auteurs, but they are entertainers, and there is value in entertaining. Sum up, if you could, real quick, Peter Hyams and his place sort of in cinema. Like, what made you want to go? Let's talk about Peter Hyams.
Well, I really like those early films. Obviously, I think my enthusiasm for them was pretty obvious, and I do really appreciate a filmmaker who has a hidden sense of style that perhaps with no art films to his credit whatsoever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I like a guy who has a sense of style that you can track consistently, and that he gets in there every time. You know what I mean? Like, I really dig that. He's not a guy without his own cinematic voice. He just has used it for these rather straightforward story purposes. Yeah. And that's not, like, as I say, not only is that not bad, that's great. That sense of cinema, even in something like Running Scared, or even in something like The Presidio, that dedication to the craft in those sorts of films is something that I lament that is missing almost entirely from today's films. You see it somewhat in genre films. You see it in horror in particular. You see where the style really is still alive when it comes to the cinematography and the direction. Not all horror, but lots of it. That's a place where you're working on a small enough level and you've got a built-in enough audience that you can do some stuff. These are these sort of straight to Netflix things and these standard biopics and stuff. They lack cinematic style, and that's something that Peter has in spades, man, and delivers in a great way that doesn't distract from the story, that helps propel the story. And connecting those dots is a fun thing. So he's in this category, he's one of the best. Sure. And he's a guy who I've listened to through the years talk about his own work and his unashamedly enthusiasm about him, and yet his pragmatical way of looking at the world of Hollywood and movie making is very, very cool. So I think he's a cool guy worth celebrating.
Let's, if you haven't checked out some of these films, just the tops of the list here: The Presidio, Narrow Margin, Running Scared, Outland, Capricorn 1, 2010, the year we made contact. Those are films worth your time.
And I think I'm going to stick to this. Capricorn 1 and Outland are going to be my next double feature on our show coming up. So if you want to do
that'll be coming up in a few. Yep.
And you haven't seen those, check them out, and then we'll all react to them together. That'll be fun, because I should switch them now that I've really said my piece on them. But hey, let's because we didn't get to say much about them.
We get to hear what the
team has to say. You know what I mean? That'll be neat.
Indeed. All right, folks, you can reach out to us at the Movie Show with Joel and Ryan page on Facebook and on YouTube. If you're watching the video feed on this, you can like and subscribe to that. That would be greatly appreciated. At Ask Joel and Ryan on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and at Ask Joel and Ryan at gmail.com if you want to email us directly. All right, everybody, take care of yourselves. We will see you all next week. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to The Movie Show with Joel and Ryan. Remember, all views and opinions represented in this podcast are personal and belong solely to the speaker and do not represent those people, institutions, or organizations that the speaker may or may not be associated with, unless explicitly stated. None of these views and opinions were intended to malign or deceive. And now, here's the producers, circa 1982, to play us out.